Hello, hello, hello. It is Helen Hartsmith, and I am here with...
Kathy. You just seem too excited.
That was totally my beginning of Rent. That was like my total Rent opener.
Okay.
And we are here with another episode of the Heart of the Witch's Path podcast.
Yes. What number?
Are you excited about this?
I am excited. What number are we?
We are on 402.
402.
402.
Two. Right.
And we have some serious matters that we are going to discuss in this episode.
Okay.
Why are you laughing? It's serious.
Because you're just all... You weren't like this 5 minutes ago.
You totally gave me hot chocolate and it did.
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. So before we get there...
Wait, yeah. What? What is it? What? It's time for the correspondence of the week. Wow, that was very dramatic. Thanks for picking up on my vibe. So, this week, our correspondence is Vervain.
Vervain.
Otherwise known as Verbena officinalis, if you're Latin, which I am not. However.
Yeah, dead language.
So, well, they still teach it in college.
They do, but nobody actually speaks it as a
I
native.
would speak it if I knew it.
Right.
That'd be sweet.
So, Vervain.
Vervain, yeah. What do we use Vervain for?
Yeah, so there are, it corresponds with the feminine, Venus, and Earth.
Yes.
The deities are Ceridwen, Mars, Venus,
Aradia, Jupiter, Thor, and Juno.
Right. Can be used for love, protection, purification, peace, money.
It's also good for youth and chastity, and it's also good for sleep and healing.
It turns back negativity. It is the herb of poets, singers, and bards.
Therefore, it inspires artistry and instills a love of what? Of learning. It's a good one for me because I like to learn.
Right.
For sure. So yes, it's a very common herb.
Yes.
To use in spell work for those purposes. I usually always have it on hand. How about you?
I believe I do have some. Yes.
Good.
So that was our
correspondence of the week.
Sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake.
Don't let me drain you, man.
Yeah.
So this week, guys, we are dedicating the podcast to someone's question.
Because we'd like to do that.
So
if you have questions, please ask.
Especially because it seems like, when someone asks a question, it's a good one.
Yeah, and it sparks a good conversation for
Exactly.
us.
Right. So I'm not really sure if this listener is okay with us using her name.
Okay, so we'll just call her listener.
We're just going to call her listener because I never did ask that question. But this listener, she dropped an email a little while ago, and I don't even remember exactly what this is in response to.
It was one of the top 10 gods and goddesses or something like that.
Yeah, maybe it was something along those lines. So this listener's email talks about how she's new to the path and that she's attracted to herbs, crystals, and just found this path and heading towards this, Wicca lifestyle. Although I don't know exactly how she identifies.
Let's go more generic and say pagan.
Pagan lifestyle. So she watched our video about gods and goddesses, and her question has to do with, do you have to believe in gods and goddesses or work with them? She said that on her altar she has elements and sorry, this is small and my old ass eyes are not working so well for. No, it's okay. I could take them off and it would be helpful. So anyhow, she doesn't have any gods and goddesses represented, and she hasn't been attracted to them. So she's wanting to know, will this lack or possible lack affect spells, or positive thoughts, or mess with any work on her altar if they're not represented. She like I said, she likes the crystals and she works with the elements, it looks like. So then she also went on to question, does she need to have a coven? So those are kind of like the two questions. Do I need to work with gods and goddesses, and do I need to have a coven? So that's the meat of what we're looking at here. So
which one do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's hit the god and goddess because that's kind of the first question.
So, I mean, that's one of the big things you hear going into paganism, any flavor, is let's work with this god, let's work with that god, let's do the goddess.
Especially if you're eclectic, then you're looking at lots of, different gods and goddesses. Or if you fall into a pantheon, then you're working with a set.
Really get thrown at you, and you should use this god for this and this god for that, and in the way that we practice, all gods are the same god. It's just an aspect of the god.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you call it Zeus or Apollo or Thor or, any name. Wumba, yeah. Or,
and the same
Celine
is, right, the same is true for the goddesses.
Or Bridget or whatever. It's basically, it all boils down to the same thing. It is the great spirit, the divine mind, the God that is the be all end all, the deity of everything, the deity. So
we learned early on in our practice and I come back to this so often. We learned early on with our work with the Karelian nativist. Dang it, I can never pronounce that correctly.
Witchschool.org.
Witchschool.org. In our time with them.
It might be com.
Witchschool.com, something along those lines.
Google Witch School.
We learned that the universal deity is like a diamond, a multifaceted diamond. And all of those facets are different faces of deity. Now, that being said, we should also mention here that there are other schools of thought in the pagan community that each of those deities are a separate individual and they're not part of a whole.
Right.
And that is a school of thought. It just doesn't happen to be ours.
Right.
Okay.
So that being said, the other side to that coin is there is deity in everything. In the minuscule particles of sand on a beach to the wide universe that surrounds our universe and planet, and there is divinity in everything, in us, in our cars, in the TV, in everything around us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and again, this is how we think. This is how we think.
So, given that, if you respect the divinity in everyone and everything,
even if you might not label that as divinity,
then it's not you don't have to put a name to the god and goddess. You don't have to put a name to the great spirit. If you honor and revere nature and each other and everything in your life and so on and so forth, then you're still honoring God and goddess and the great spirit and the divine mind and divinity.
Right. And that's how that sometimes this kind of a discussion boils down to definitions and words.
Right.
Because that is Kathy's look at the universe.
Right.
Okay. And those are ideas that she has put to those words. And the next person might have a very different, they might have very different words that describe the same ideas.
Right.
Okay. So that's one thing. That's a big thing. If you're new to paganism, or even if you're old to paganism, that's a really big concept to grasp and remember and respect, is that your thoughts can be very, very different. And I know we talk about this a lot. Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing is how your practice is your own, your path is your own. So you have to figure out what works for you,
what resonates with you.
Right. And so if working with a god or goddess figure doesn't work for you, then nobody can determine that except yourself.
Right. If you feel comfortable honoring the sacredness in stones and herbs, why is that bad? It's not. It's as long as you're being respectful and honoring the sacredness.
Right. And one big thing too to kind of keep in mind, especially if you're new to this kind of a thought process or
Randy's phone was ringing.
I didn't hear it.
I did.
So if you're new to Wicca or new to paganism, and say that at this moment in time you don't have a connection to a god, to a deity figure, that's okay. You don't have to. You're not signing your name in blood anywhere saying, I agree to all of this. Again, your practice is your own.
Right.
But one thing to keep in mind is that you may find yourself a year down the road, 5 years down the road, maybe you're connecting with a deity figure.
Right. Something else that you can do is if you have a specific purpose that you want to do spell work for, even if you don't want to work with a god or goddess on a normal everyday basis, you can still choose one to work with for the length of that spell. You don't have to.
You can ask one to work with you. Right.
You can ask. Or one might come to you and say, hey, you want this and I want this, and let me help you and you help me.
Right. Exactly. It's a very working with gods and goddesses is the same thing for me as working with those deva spirits that are the stone spirits and the plant spirits and the animal spirits. It's all about building a relationship. And just because you think malachite is pretty and you want to use malachite and work with malachite doesn't mean that malachite wants to work with you.
True.
And so it's about respect. If you want malachite to work with you in a spell, then the least you can do is ask.
Right.
Okay, that's the first thing. The least you can do is ask. The second thing you can do is say, is there something I can do for you for helping me out with this little bit?
Right.
And they might, maybe they want, something as small as, give me an offering of grain on your altar.
Right.
Set out a little bowl of grain or
charge me in the moonlight.
Exactly. And the okay thing with that is that it's kind of a negotiation thing.
Right.
So you have the right, you ask, you do your due diligence and you ask, and they might come back with something that's a little bit more than you're willing to give.
Right. Right.
So you can negotiate those things.
Yeah.
But that's true for deva spirits or divinity spirits.
It's true
too.
for anything that you work with.
Right.
You know what? It's true with people that you meet. I mean, you can become friends with someone and they're really demanding, and you go, oh, you know what? I'm done because I can't give you what you need.
Right.
On the other side of that, you can't have a friend and take,
right,
and never give them anything.
Right.
It's the same concept.
Right.
So
definitely.
So the short answer to all of that is no, you don't have to work with a god or goddess. Yes, you should still really respect everything everywhere.
Right.
And keep an open mind, because someday you might find somebody that wants to work with you or that you want to work with. And something that I found very interesting early on was you look to where if you're interested in working with a god or goddess, look to where your interests are, and you'll probably find them there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Because they've probably been knocking on the door for a while.
Right. And you might not be aware of it.
Right.
Right.
So that was the god.
That's the god and goddess question. Yeah. And then as far as coven, what do you think about? Unfortunately, we've never been.
Well, no, that's not true.
Without each.
Well, I was doing.
Oh yeah, you were doing stuff before.
Yeah. So it's easier now than it used to be, but not everybody has the luxury of knowing, meeting, or working with other people who walk a pagan path.
Right.
It's not as difficult as it used to be, but for some people it is still very difficult to be out of the closet, to express your personal beliefs, to be who you are, and such. So when I started learning, I didn't have anybody to learn with me. I bought a book at a bookstore, and then I bought another book, and then I bought another book, and I started practicing. And no, you do not have to have a coven. Does it help? Yeah, it does. Is it necessary? Absolutely not.
Right. And some people may be comfortable
some people
doing it by themselves.
Way more comfortable doing it by themselves.
Right. And that's fine. If that's how that's your choice. So
the light is shining on your phone and right in my eyes.
Oh, I'm so very sorry.
It's okay. I turned it. I just picked up the thing and moved it. Yeah. So that being said, do you want to work with other people? If you're interested in that, I know this person said that they were in the middle of not necessarily Bible Belt based on where she was.
Right. But a conservative,
very Christian conservative area of the country. So it might be more difficult to find somebody there.
Right.
However, how far are you willing to travel? Is there a larger city, maybe an hour away?
Right.
We're in mid-Michigan. Where we are at is kind of rural, but there's, Flint and Lansing are not that far away from us. Mm-hmm. If we want to try to connect with somebody there, we recommended somebody we talked to a couple of weeks ago, try a local New Age store, see if there is classes, see if they have covens that people, want to do open rituals so that you can come to them. Most states have pagan pride picnics.
Right.
There's things like convocation where you can go to meet people.
Right.
So that's all in-person stuff, but there's this huge online community on Instagram and Tumblr and Facebook and probably
there's so many
other social media sites that I'm too old to get into because Facebook is for old people.
Oh, really?
Really? You apparently didn't see that video.
No, I did not.
Freaking hilarious. But anyway, they're out there. If you are interested in talking with other people, having an online dialogue with other people, they are out there. And let me just plug a podcast that I listen to. So I listen to this podcast called My Favorite Murder because yes, I am into murder podcasts, and true crime. I should say not murder, but it's true crime. And this My Favorite Murder is this huge podcast. It took off. Everybody listens to it. Well, okay, I listen to it and a lot of people online listen to it. And they have fan pages on Facebook that divide, like they have a Mitten Murderinos. So that's people from Michigan who belong to that. Well, they've also come out with a Witcherino. So it's people who are really into this My Favorite Murder podcast who are also pagan witches. And that's really popular. There's a lot of people in it. And there's a lot of questions and should I do this? And what do you do? And questions going back and forth. So look for another interest that you have and see if there's somebody else who is interested in paganism.
Right, see if there's another group within that.
See if there's a crossover.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the My Favorite Murder also has a supernatural side group, which, yeah, moose and squirrel. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, so there's definitely, there's a lot more opportunities lately
the last
in which to connect with people,
right?
And like Kathy said about checking out New Age stores for happenings and things like that, maybe there's a meetup group like what we started about a year and a half ago.
Depending on how comfortable you feel, maybe you could start one,
right?
And I think we did a podcast on that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're okay on your own, then nobody's telling you have to.
Right.
But as I kind of said in my return email to this listener, a lot of us, human nature is to be social and to seek community.
And to seek other people who believe in the same way or close to the same way that we do.
And so, don't just be fatalistic about your path and say, well, I'm just never going to find anyone to practice with. You have to put in the work.
Right.
And that's not to say too that if you wanted a community to to participate in things with, you could put intention out there
Right.
with spell work.
And follow it up with the mundane activities.
Exactly.
Like going to your local New Age store or a Pagan Pride Day,
Right.
or getting online and joining some communities.
Right, exactly. There's lots of opportunities out there. So, hopefully that kind of answers that question for our listener and
Right.
for everyone. Is there any other kind of
Yeah, I don't think so. It's just, if you want to be involved, get out there and find a way to be involved. And
Right.
if there isn't anything out there and you feel comfortable with it, make your own.
Right. And the bottom line too is this is your path.
Right.
And
you might find a lot of screwy people that, while they're also pagan, you really would rather not.
And that's okay. But I think one thing that I can't help but stress is that if you're someone who's kind of a loner, then at least put yourself out there and read.
Yeah.
Do reading. Do reading, and even do reading in parts of paganism that might not speak to you.
Because you'll find something that resonates with you, something that, this little grain that you go, oh yeah, I can get behind that.
And you usually will find something.
Right.
But knowledge is power, guys.
Yep.
And yes, you can be very sure about where you're at, but there's always something that can be learned by looking at the other side of the coin.
Right.
Or
and blind faith is really not where you want to be. It's important to be able to back up your beliefs and to be able to question them. And if they're a valid belief that resonates with you, even if you question it, you'll come back to it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's probably the most solid advice that we can give at this point.
Right.
So I think on that, we'll end on that note.
So if you learned something,
please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button. We would love to hear your take on these two questions about whether or not to work with divinity in some form or another. And what do you think about working in a coven?
Or alone.
Do you work in a coven and wish that you didn't, or vice versa? We would like to hear from you about that. So
if you have found a way to create your own community, how did you do that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, if you have other questions on different topics, let us know. This is not the first time that we've taken a listener question and done a podcast of it. And we're more than happy to do that if we feel we can give you some good advice or have something valuable to add.
Right. Yeah, definitely. If something of value that adds to the conversation, that's always importante. So if you're not comfortable leaving a comment below and would rather email, you can do so at heartofthewitchespath@yahoo.com.
Helen also has an Instagram that she's popular with.
And don't forget to check that out. That's at Heart of the Witches Path.
And then I'm getting more active on Instagram at Slays Vamps.
So that's going to be it for this podcast. Thanks for tuning in and checking out episode 402. And thanks for walking the path for a little while with us. Until next time, blessed be.